and time trials and stuff like that will help you for a race, because you'll be so used to it that it won't take as much energy. It won't take
absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things we were going to talk about is how do you reduce anxiety? Because we're not changing competitive pressure, right? But so now the model of how you essentially don't choke, how you can kind of change this, because the key here is that the anxiety leads to conscious control of the skill, that which leads to diminished performance. So the best place to intervene is to reduce the anxiety that you experience. There are a number of ways to reduce the anxiety. There are very simple techniques through, we have something called progressive muscle relaxation, which is a skill that actually needs to be practiced kind of on a regular basis, but it's essentially kind of a body monitoring exercise where you focus on each muscle in your body, you notice if there's tension there or not, and you squeeze the muscle as hard as you can for 10 seconds and then let it go. You do this all over your body, and what it actually does is kind of induce a state of relaxation. But also, the abdominal breathing that you're talking about is one of the most beneficial skills that you're an athlete or not, just as a person, to know how to abdominally breathe is super important. And this is something that I've actually learned how to do. I spend 5 hours on the golf course doing nothing but basically thinking about my breath and focusing on my breath. And, for you guys, when you're actually racing, your breathing pattern is going to be very different from a relaxation breathing, but focusing on your breath is something that you can absolutely do. So I want you guys to do a little bit of an experiment. If you ever watch a baby breathe, their belly, in and out, in and out, in and out. But when we've learned kind of, being adults and living lives of stress and we shallowly breathe, so our shoulders are up and we kind of breathe like this. Especially when you're under stress, we shallowly breathe. And I don't know if you've ever breathed into a paper bag, but if you've ever hyperventilated before, we essentially live in kind of a minimal state of hyperventilation, where the way that we breathe normally. So, and you were mentioning yoga. They talk about you focusing on your breath and breathing all the time. It's the same thing. So I want all of you guys to put your hands on your belly. Okay, and this is called the square breath technique. And it's a square because you breathe in for 4, you hold it for 4, you exhale for 4, and you pause it for 4. Okay? So the only stipulation is this, is that the breath fills up your belly first. So when you breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. And your belly pushes down. So I want your hand on your belly because I want it to expand and then push down. The breath starts in the belly and then exits through the belly, okay? So I want all of you to close your eyes because everyone feels embarrassed when they do this exercise, so it's easier for everyone to just close their eyes. And we're going to do 4 sets of these breaths, okay? Everyone close their eyes. Ready? I'll guide you through it, okay? Hands on your belly. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to pause it for 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to hold that there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next one, begin. Ready? Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 1, 3. Hold it. Next one. Inhale. 1. Hold it. 1. Exhale. Hold it. And with each breath that you take in, you're expanding your chest muscles. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to hold it there for a few seconds. Okay, now open your eyes. So we just did 4 breaths there, but I bet most of you actually notice it's a very different way of breathing than you normally do on a daily basis. And the fact is that the physiological anxiety response and breathing that way are incompatible. So the fact is that when you're actually amped up, when you're feeling stressed out, now when you're first learning this skill, it's something you actually have to practice. You might have to do 10 of these in a row, 20 of these in a row. But really good athletes, they get to a point, if you watch Tiger Woods or you watch any kind of Olympians, they can kind of trigger that relaxation response with one big deep breath. But watch them. It's always through the nose. Just like that. And sometimes, that's all it takes. And I know, it's very simple. And by the way, this is not, here, now you've learned how to do an abdominal breath. There you go. You're never going to feel anxiety again. But this is a really good skill for you guys to incorporate into your lives on a daily basis. Because we always feel stressed. And I said, you're fighting with your girlfriend, you're fighting with your friends, you're fighting with your parents, you're pissed off, you're angry. Focus on your breath. Another thing that focusing on your breath does, it makes you not focus on whatever the other stuff, whatever the bad things you were thinking about, right? So
could you do this during a race as well?
You know what? And like I mentioned to you before, all of this relaxation breathing is all about, you know, the anxiety that you feel leading up to the race, right? I'm not an exercise physiologist, and I don't understand, you know, breathing patterns or, you know, an appropriate breathing response during a race. But the fact is that you guys, while skiing, are naturally deep breathing, right? You're going to breathe. Now, maybe not. Maybe sometimes you guys are breathing shallow.
I think that there's probably points where you're breathing shallow in a sprint or something like that. Mm-hmm. You could just probably think about maybe deepening the breath.
Well, I find like if I think about breathing kind of deep into my diaphragm, like on downhills, if I'm starting to like tense up, it can kind of reset me. Like, be beneficial for like when I come into the next uphill or whatever after the downhill. So.
Yeah, I find even during races and things that you can do one or two and it just kind of calms you down and gets you back into the zone again.
So, how do you not think about the skill that you're doing? Focus on your breath. Honestly, because this is the exercise that we always use too. Okay, so whatever you guys do now, there's one thing that I don't want you to think about. Okay, so I want you to pay special attention, but whatever you do, do not think of a gigantic pink elephant that's in the room right now. Just don't do it. Just don't, no, like, whatever you do not think about a huge pink elephant that's sitting there in the corner. He's big and he's bright pink. Don't do it. You know, some people always like to joke around and say, okay, I didn't do it. But the fact is that the way our brains work is that we don't really understand the do or do not or whatever, right? It's like we work in images. Our brain works in images. So by simply thinking, okay, I'm not going to think about a big pink elephant, you've thought about the pink elephant, right? So we're not really good at saying, don't think about this, don't think about winning, don't think about doing that, right? Because what you're telling yourself not to, that image is still in your head, right? So instead, it's much easier to focus on something else. And the easiest thing to do, some people have mantras, some people have things like relax or peace or whatever. Focusing on your breath is just really easy. You know, I find it the easiest thing to do. So when I'm on the 16th hole and I'm playing well, I'm 1 under par, and oh my God, this might be a career, you know, best for me. And I'm thinking about all my teammates coming up and giving me a high five and being all excited. That's getting ahead of yourself, right? So what do? I think about my breath. I take these deep breaths and I just keep thinking about it over and over and over and over. And I don't stop doing it. So anyway.
What would IK Kim have been thinking about?
Probably, realistically, do you probably know what happened? Wow, I cannot believe I'm going to be winning this tournament. Okay, great. I'm going to go through my routine here. So now, as long as I set up, there's the hole. Now, I just got to make sure because, wow, I would not want to be missing a 1-footer. So I'm just going to make sure that my hand goes back nice and smooth, and I want to make sure that I hit that putt very square, right? That's not the stuff that you think about when you're golfing. You think nothing at all. Or some people have these keys where they say things, you know, they hum in their head, they sing a song, they do whatever, but they're not thinking about their technique.
Or as, to make it applicable, because this is really applicable for skiing, but to make it more applicable, like think of the good races that you've had. Those are the races where you have like a long internal dialogue with yourself on, you know, how things are going. You're thinking like, oh, Jordy's thinking like, oh, Colin and I are gonna make some great chili for dinner tonight. And Zeke's like, oh yeah, man, Jesse was really annoying yesterday. Or like whatever the case may be. What are the best races? Like, Jordy, what was the best race you had? Let's say the Classic at Nationals. What are you thinking?
Not a whole lot. Like, I definitely not. Yeah, but my chili.
Right?
Even though it was pretty awesome.
Honestly, you could be thinking of Call of Duty. I don't like. You can think of whatever you want. Just don't be thinking about your technique.
Well,
It's not good to
I
think about
was
it.
during the
Yeah.
race. I was.
Okay.
thinking of my technique.
So, well, now listen. So now when I'm talking about fine motor skills, right? Are you thinking about your elbows? So Peter's talking to me about when you guys are learning a new skill, you try to incorporate images like, what were you saying about hips?
Hips forward, driving your knee.
Right. Are you specifically thinking about where your arms are going to be? Okay, so now my pole, I need to raise my hand up a certain level and then place the pole on the ground this way. So when you say you're thinking about technique, what are you actually thinking about?
Well, often there'll be like coaches on the side of the trail. Like I remember Mike was on the side of the trail at Nationals, and he was saying just to really try and get the glide going
Okay.
on the uphills, and bring my hands up a little bit higher
Okay.
during the race.
So there was a little bit of internal focus then, wasn't there? So now,
Could have been better.
so this is what I'm going to ask you guys then. Do you think that actually having, by the way, I should say that little kind of buzzwords, like very simple, we call them swing thoughts or whatever, so something like smooth,
Yeah.
gliding, or just like,
Reach.
reach,
Yeah.
stuff like that is absolutely okay. But consciously thinking, so when you're learning a new technique, how many steps do you have to break it down into? Quite a bit, right? Like you think about like, oh geez, well your leg's not here, your hip's not, right? Like you break it down into a number of small different steps that eventually turns into a smooth, seamless motion. That's what you can't be thinking about. But having these kind of like little catchphrases that kind of remind you of what your ideal performance is, that's fine. But when we're talking about conscious control, is literally you thinking about your hand grabbing the fork and thinking about, right? And that's what I really mean about conscious control.
Well, I think like skiing is a little bit different than golfing or sports like maybe diving, where you're going from a static position to like one movement with fine, motor skills. In which case you cannot be thinking, especially in diving, right? You can't be thinking at all that, what you're doing. You have to go on muscle memory.
Absolutely.
But skiing, since you're in a constant state of motion, I think you have a lot more leeway. You can think about your technique a lot more.
Hmm. You can recover from things a lot easier.
Yeah, I use a lot of keywords. I think that's what you're saying. That's fine, but I think you can also think about specific things as well if you're in a race, just because of the different movements.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think sometimes, obviously you won't be thinking of, like the specific movements of like lifting your arm, or kind of putting your leg down in a specific way. But I think it actually can be super beneficial to think of your technique in maybe a kind of more vague or like a more general sense, and think of like a specific like feeling you want to have with your body.
Absolutely.
And that can be actually like help out quite a bit. Or just think about like relaxing your technique, something like that.
So and again, and I didn't put this in because I said like we could talk about one of these topics for a really long time, right? But there's really good research by this. Her name's Gabrielle Wolf, and she's at the University of Las Vegas, and her research is all about the focus. So should I have an internal focus or an external focus? So an external focus would be you guys thinking about the snow, and an internal focus would be you thinking about your knees or something, right? And then she has, the differences between proximal and distal. So is it better to think about something kind of farther away externally or something close externally? Or in golf, thinking about your belt buckle versus thinking about your hip bone, right? So she does research looking at like what's better to think about. Is it better for you to think about your boot or your foot? They seem like almost the same thing, but she finds differences in like in that. But the point is yeah, having, like you say, like having these kind of buzzwords almost, or you say just like reminders about general technique, absolutely. But once that gets you into that kind of state that you need to be, do you need to continue to focus on it? Or do you only need to focus on it when you can feel it kind of deviating from where it needs to be,
like
right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you see guys thrashing at the beginning of a race, or panicking, or just sliding out.
They're not really conscious of their motions, and they're just like a blender instead of really being smooth and thinking about reach or glide.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so I wanted to move on to that. I'm just conscious of time here. How are you guys doing, by the way? Like, you getting pretty restless or what? I know it's been. Does anyone need to rip for a bathroom break? I mean, we don't have to. By the way, we don't have to get through all of this today. Like, I would rather almost. Maybe we could cut it off at that.
I think we're good for a little bit more.
No,
Are you guys okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Finding it valuable? Yep.
I just don't want you guys to get bored and go like, all right, I'm not paying attention.
No, I
anymore,
think
so.
you got some rapt attention here.
You got the little comic relief
Yeah.
things every once in a while.
Yeah.
So,
Or what was that person's name from the
Gabrielle Wolf. So WULF. Yeah, she's really good. Actually, I met her at that conference too. It was she's a very quiet German lady and not a good presenter, but her research is awesome.
Is there an answer to that question about like whether it's better to?
It all depends on sport, and that's what I'm working on right now in my PhD. I'm doing so I'm trying to figure out how to design another study on like using some of her principles. So you know what? No, I don't really have an answer. What I know is that they have some studies on like people on balancing boards, and they get them to focus on dots that are further away from their feet versus dots that are closer away, and they find that or closer to them, that when they focus on the dot that's closer to them, their balance is better versus if it was right. So it's like it all depends on the task, but what they find is that having an external focus is more beneficial than an internal one. So rather than thinking about your body per se, something like an external focus like smooth. That doesn't mean, like smooth knees or smooth legs or, right? It's not thinking about forcing your legs through space. It's a focus that's related to the task, but it's external. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about is why do we get anxious? So we know, like I said, I briefly told you guys that, we get anxious during competitive situations, but when we really do an analysis of like why athletes get anxious under pressure, it's more often than not, it's traced back to a fear of negative evaluation or a fear of loss. So it comes down, and when I say fear of negative evaluation, it's as simple as not wanting to be the high finisher on the team for a weekend. So what we call it is our 5 guy. So how tournament golf works is we send 5 players, the best 4 scores count for a day. And we play 54 holes, right? So you can count one day, not count another day, and then it's a team total. But we always have bets with each other that you don't want to be the high finisher. You don't want to be the 5th place finisher overall. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get razzed about it in the bus. You might have to you have to sit in the front seat with the coach. And our coach is crazy, so you guys have much better coaches for your team. But it's things like that. So literally, but it can be much more severe than that. And I mean, a lot of athletes have this pressure, this external pressure, whether it comes from parents, whether it comes from wanting to impress the coaches, whether it comes from wanting to fit in on the team. I don't know. The answers could be different. Whether it's you just don't want to have your name displayed on a website with a high finish, who knows what it is. Or it's a fear of loss. So like we say, in a big tournament, it could be losing your goal, not achieving your goal, misqualifying for an important team, people who are going for scholarships in school, right? It's like, it could be any number of reasons, but the reason that we feel anxiety in pressure situations, when we really get to the root of it, more often than not, it's about a fear of negative evaluation. So, I put it here, like, think about the social consequences of a poor race for you guys. What happens? So if you have a high finish, and I say, sorry, so high finish for golf is bad, low finish is good. I don't know, do you guys have the same, like, you know what I
Same.
Other way around?
Yeah.
A high, like if you place it, like high is good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. If you finish low, if you have a bad time, or whatever, what are the social consequences for you guys? I know, see, this one's a little tough. This is more not, embarrassing isn't the right word, but.
Well, probably the biggest disappointment is just dealing with myself.
Yeah.
I would say, like, if I had a bad race and I didn't qualify for an event I wanted to qualify for or something like that, I'd just be like really mad at myself basically. So.
And why?
Because I should have been able to qualify for it, and I think I could have.
Okay, and you could have qualified for it, but what does that mean when you don't qualify?
Then you sit at home and you cry.
Well, maybe there's things you could have done along the road that you didn't do to qualify for the event or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you've done all the things.
Oh, if you have all
You've done all the things. I'm asking, like, what happens when you guys have a poor race? How do you guys deal with, do you travel always as a team to the races?
Yeah.
Well, like, everybody's pretty supportive of everybody
Yeah.
else, so, like, nobody ever gets down on somebody.
Yeah.
Like,
Unless you drop out of the race.
okay, well, I can take that back right now. But yeah, like, I find at least it's more on myself than,
Yeah.
like, other people being
Okay.
on
I
you.
would agree.
Unless Chris Weller wins, and then everybody sucks with him.
That happened a long time ago, so I take a lot of heat from that.
So what were you going to say?
Well, just that, like, sometimes you can make a lot of sacrifices, like time, energy, money, all these things to skiing, and it becomes a bit of part of your identity.
Mhm.
Right? Like, you're a skier, like, that's what you do. You don't go to school as much because you ski and all these things. So if you don't perform at skiing, well, then you don't really perform at what you do, what you are.
You know,
And
that's a wonderful insight.
It's
Yeah.
horribly
That
like,
is-
depressing.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Think about how much time we put into our sports. It is a part of you. It is you, in a certain way, right? When you don't perform as well as you could, it's a loss. You lose your identity in a way. You know, and these are all these things that, like, look, we have to actually, like, really go deep down. But if you think about it, like, why do you get nervous in a race if you actually don't care? Like you were saying, you don't really get nervous for races, right?
I'm thinking about it.
Well, of course,
Let's say
because you're.
qualifying for that team or winning this race or having a top 10 there, so that's good to think about it right now, but not like the weekend of the race.
Yeah. You're an athlete. You want to win. You're a competitive athlete. So you're doing this to perform well.
And
So,
how
yeah.
do you not think about it? Because it's hard, you know.
exactly.
It's really hard. And this is what I'm saying to you, is that these are the reasons that we get so anxious when we go to races, because of
Yeah.
all of the potential glory that can come.
You know, it's funny. I get nervous before races. Like, I'll get into these races like the Chelsea Challenge, and I'll be thinking, "Oh, there's Kevin Jones there."